Hello, and thanks for stopping by. This is Mousetrap for the Atari 2600, and I'm playing the game from a cartridge on a Retron 77. Mousetrap is a game developed by Exidy and ported by Coleco to the Atari 2600. It existed for a variety of different systems and had an arcade version too. I can only assume the Atari version is one of the more basic versions. Overall, this is mostly just a Pac-Man clone with some different mechanics thrown in. I don't have a problem with that, as the new additions are actually kind of interesting. First, basic Pac-Man rules apply. There's a maze that you run through. You pick up pellets of some sort. You need to avoid some type of an enemy that's running through the maze after you. And you can pick up some sort of power-up that lets you destroy or eat the enemy. The overall goal of a game like this is obviously to survive as long as you can and just collect as many points as possible. In this game, you're a mouse in a maze, running around, avoiding cats, and eating bits of cheese. You can also collect bones along the way, which actually are your power-ups. You have 3 mice, these are your lives, and every time you hit an increment of 500, you get a new mouse. The game has 2 main mechanics that set it apart from Pac-Man, and they have to do with how the fire button is used. Interesting enough, the fire button has 2 different functions, which is kind of unusual for an Atari 2600 game. The first use is when you have bones stored in your inventory. If you quickly press the fire button, you use a bone, transform into a dog, and now you can eat cats for a short period of time. It's useful to keep a few bones on hand to get you out of tight spots. I can't say the power-up lasts very long, but it's certainly long enough to save you. The second use of the button is for the game's main mechanic. You can actually change the layout of the map. As you go around the maze, you'll see some of the walls flickering. If you press and hold the fire button down a second, those flickering walls will shift position, and now you have a different shaped maze. This isn't a random shift, mind you, it's not that crazy. It's not random. It just shifts to an alternate layout. It's an interesting thing to be able to change the game field in the middle of a game, and you can use it to trap or corral the cats into different areas. I'm not particularly good at this game, but it seems to me a couple of thousand points is a decent enough score. When you eat cheese, which is the main object of the game, they're only worth 1 point at a time. Eating cats, I think, is worth 10. Still, you generally only get a couple hundred points when you clear a level. This is also one of those games that seems to me doesn't crank up the difficulty with any steep curve. I mean, when I first played this, I cleared a handful of levels with pretty much no fuss. For a while I wondered if the difficulty ever changed, but I'm pretty sure it does. It just takes a while. I never had this particular game as a kid, but playing it now, I have to say, these are some decent mechanics. Changing the fundamental path of a maze as you're running in it is an interesting enough concept to explore, and being able to use the power-ups when you want is kinda great. It may be a little thing too, but you do get a little jingle at the start of each level, and that's kinda nice. When it comes to music in Atari games, there are 3 categories. You have games with no music at all, games with short jingles, and even a few games that have music the whole time. But generally speaking, music on the 2600 is pretty rare. I usually turn on the stereo to fill the space. I can't say this is the greatest game ever, but I'm not upset to have it in my collection. The colors are a little boring, and I don't think I'd play this one for hours on end, but there are much worse experiences to be had on the system, and worse experiences to be had from my collection. The original Pac-Man was pretty rough for the 2600, and Mousetrap, by comparison, I have to say, is certainly a better experience. Personally, I've never been good at Pac-Man games in general. I do play them from time to time, but I've never sat down and studied what it might take to get really good at a game like this, cruising through mazes. I know that there are videos out there on YouTube, and there are some really good studies on Pac-Man out there. There are certainly patterns you can remember to get you through games like this to maximize your gameplay and score, but I think that's just a little too much dedication for me. Mousetrap is a simple enough game, I think, and I feel it's worth a few bucks to spend to get it. It's both familiar and different enough at the same time, and it's kind of fun. Well, that's all I have for this one. Thanks for stopping by. Catch you next time.